Welcome back to Pass the Balance Sheet. There's a moment that happens in almost every business we work with. A founder will say something like, I've been in this business every day. How did I miss this? And the truth is, they didn't miss it because they're inattentive or inexperienced. They missed it because founders and CEOs and CFOs are looking at the same business through very different lenses. Today, we're talking about what a CFO sees that founders and CEOs usually don't. Not a critique, but as an expansion of perspective. Let's dig in. Good evening, friend.
Well, hello again.
How are you doing?
Long time.
I know, long time no see. How's it going?
Doing.
Have we shared where we're at with our listeners, where we are located? I know they know we
We
don't.
have not.
Okay. We could share state. I don't know if I want to share exactly where I'm located. I don't want you guys
Yeah,
tracking me
let's stick
down,
with state.
but I've said desert, so they'll probably figure out where I am. But I'm in southern Utah, and it was so hot today. So we moved here because we wanted the weather and warmer climate. Um, and we have a couple months deemed winter. Winter in the
hmm
desert is why people move to the desert. So it's, I don't know, 60s, 50s, 60s in the morning, and then we get to 75 in the afternoon. Maybe a little bit of rain. We get like 5 days of rain a year. But we usually have this gradual increase to heat. Like we have these like 75, then slowly into the 80s, then the 90s, then we start to creep into triple digits. And this winter, we had one weekend of just misery. Just you don't realize how much you missed the sun until you've had it for 300 days. So we had 2 days
hmm
where it just torrential downpour and it was miserable. And that was our winter. And now today, I think it was like 95 degrees in the end of
Oh my.
March. So we are full in summer, and I'm a little worried for when actually summer
Y-
comes. So,
Yes, we
yeah.
definitely skipped summer this year for sure. I am in also a very sunny state. We have, I think eventually our listeners will find out, but I'm not giving it up quite yet.
She's not giving the tea.
um, I'm not giving the tea, but I think it will be evident when you come visit me and we see Mel Robbins because it'll be known when she actually came to visit. But
Well, we're a
in
little
any
delayed,
case,
so they still might have to do some puzzle work.
that may be true. Yes, yeah, they might
Yeah,
know just the range, but it's not like somebody is just so desperate to find out and do all this homework.
it's true.
Anyway, I live also in a state where it's sunny most of the year, though I have a little bit of a kind of a bet with the weather gods because it is my birthday next week, and it has been like seriously without a fail every single year since my childhood. It would be like super nice and springy pretty much all of March, and then on my birthday it would hit with a snowstorm, and it was that way like everywhere that I lived. And so we're just making a bet with my family, like we don't see any snow or rain on the horizon. It might be a different year, but we just always kind of get excited, like, oh, maybe it's gonna be, and no.
Oh
So
my
we'll see.
gosh,
We'll see.
that
Maybe we
is
get a
so
little bit of a
funny.
cold streak.
That's so funny. Yeah, we're a little concerned. We back up to we back up to a mountain range, like our back window. You just look at beautiful. They give the Rockies a run for their money. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but they're two kind of sets. Like the first one is a red rock, and then right behind that you've got very evanescence of a Rocky Mountain. In the winter, it gets snow capped. We haven't had any snow on that mountain this year, which is a little worrisome because last year, I think it was in August, maybe it was in July. It was in the summertime. We were sitting on the couch and reading, and I looked up, and all you could see was just the entire mountain on fire.
Oh
We had a lightning
my.
strike that ended up starting a fire, and it ended up burning the whole mountain. And I think bird's eye
Yes.
from our house to that mountaintop is 13 miles. You got a little valley between the two mountains, but I will tell you, there is something that will cause a lot of anxiety in you when you see flames coming over a mountain from
Oh yes.
your living room. It will give you so
Yeah.
as much as we
I
love the
can
desert and
imagine.
as much as we love the beautiful weather that we get to experience, I am a little worried for our summer and our water
Hmm.
situation in the desert, if you will.
Yes, indeed.
But today's conversation I'm really excited for because we're talking about kind of the differences between CFOs and founders slash CEOs. Very important seats in a business, but they're looking for different things. A lot of times these two roles are pitted against each other or kind of act as sibling rivalry, if you will, because of the differences that they're looking for, the differences that they're experiencing, and kind of what their roles are at the core. I'm exceptionally excited about this one because I've not only sat as a CFO, but I've also sat as a CEO. And so I have perspective into both. You and I were talking a little bit pre-show about um, how we kind of dog on founders and CEOs and business leaders. Um, and it's all in good fun, really. These episodes and these conversations are for you. We do them in good fun because Sassy and myself have also gone through these mistakes ourselves, and we are far enough removed from them that we can kind of laugh about them and be a little, I don't know, jovial about them now. um, but I hope you guys are taking them all in good fun. But I'm really excited about this conversation because you will get some perspective from experience in both seats.
Indeed. Well, yes. Let's jump in. To your point, even our last episode, we talked about several areas where, a founder or a person in operations might make a decision based on, half of the picture or a certain data point or comparing, with the wrong or an incomplete data a time period or something like that. And then, from the CFO's perspective, it's like, well, I could have told you that's coming. I could have showed you this report, or I know this thing about the way that or the way that we're recognizing revenue or whatever, that I saw it coming. So I definitely want to delve into some of those examples that where we have different perspectives and we make decisions based on the different things that we're seeing. So I definitely want to hear some of the when you sat in the CEO seat, some of the data that you were looking at and some of the decisions that you made, and help open up my mind about some of these decisions that come from up top that I am sometimes battling later.
Yeah, I'm excited. Let's dig in. So, from a CFO standpoint, we're really, I don't know a good CFO, and I say good all the time when it comes, I preface CFO with good CFO because there are some not great CFOs out there. But a good CFO is rarely looking at individual transactions, right? They're looking at the holistic picture. They're looking at all that goes into this. We talked about this a little bit in the last episode in terms of when it comes to revenue and revenue growth, what is attributing to that? Is it more inventory move, more software move, more sales move, or is it cost inflation? Is it more customers? Like there's so many layers into this. And so uh, most CFOs are looking for patterns. We love trends, we love patterns, and we want to find where those differences lie. Things that we're looking at or that I looked at as a CFO in the manufacturing world was revenue concentration. And one of the reasons that this was so important from the CFO side of things was if you have some some customer holding a large amount of revenue, that's great. You've got revenue on the books. But unfortunately, the CFO, and this is why CFOs kind of get a bad rap, is we're looking at the other side, right? We're looking at the unpopular outcome, which is if this customer falls off, what happens? So if we're
Mhm.
looking for round even numbers, if you're doing $10 million a year and one customer is holding 20% of that revenue, and you lose that customer, your revenue went from 10 million down to 8 million. That's a pretty big dip. And so now you have to find ways to recoup that 2 million, or you're going to have to explain the loss. And so every industry is different. In our particular business, we were trying to keep concentration levels below 20%. We found that that was kind of the sweet spot. In you have some really large customers that unfortunately they're going to take a big pull, and you have some smaller customers that you do want to service, and they help bridge that gap. And if you were to lose a big customer, but 20% was kind of that sweet spot that if we lost them, you were going to feel it, but it wasn't going to be detrimental to the business. And we moved to that due to having a situation where we lost a large customer that was holding over 50%. And so we started
Mhm.
to put those
Yes.
parameters in after we felt that painful hit. And so
Mhm.
um so from the CFO side of things, concentration was super important. However, when I moved to the CEO role, there was an interesting shift. And the CFO brain never went away. It was always kind of there to protect on the financial side of things. But when you're sitting as a CEO founder, CEO specifically, you're answering to a board. For those of you
Mhm.
that don't, maybe not know, larger companies, you have a board of directors. And so while CEO is this big grandiose title, you still answer to someone, and typically it's a table of people, if you will. That one person is anywhere from, I don't know, 3 to 7 people, depending on your company size. Could be larger. Um, Typically an odd number of people for voting situations. And so when you sit in that CEO role, the concentration, while it's important to understand, you're typically tied to a revenue goal, or you're tied to EPS, which is earnings per share, right? And most of your board of directors are stakeholders in some fashion of the business. And so if the business is doing well, their dividends are also doing well. If the business is doing uh, poorly, they're either not getting dividends, or their dividends are not what they expected. And so from the CEO side of things, a lot of the mindset is any revenue is good revenue, because you're going to have to go answer to this board. And one thing that I think is important for listeners to know, and for a little bit of grace on the leadership side that we've been kind of hitting on, is when you have a situation where you're having a conversation, like as a CFO, your boss is typically the CEO. When you're having uh, a repivot or redirection conversation, one of those unpopular conversations, if you will, it's one-on-one, right? They're not fun conversations. I'm sure you've been a part of them. I know I've certainly been a part of my fair share of them, but it's one-on-one, right? It's a little bit more manageable. When you're sitting as a founder CEO, you're going into a board of, like I said, 5 to 7 people. And so
Mhm.
you're instantly on the defense. And so the mindset here in revenue concentration specifically is all revenue is good revenue, because if the revenue is up, then I don't have to get my butt chewed out today. And if the
Mhm.
if the revenue is down, then I'm going to have to answer to everyone. And it's going to be more than a question. It's really going to be a drilling until they feel like they have berated me enough. Um,
Mhm.
and so hopefully that gives our listeners a little bit of perspective in the different dynamics, specifically in this topic. We have quite a few topics we want to talk about today, but revenue concentration specifically, the mindset shifts a little bit there in those two different seats. But I would love your perspective um, in that.
Yeah, you touched on probably the biggest thing here, and that's the kind of the pressure from from the stakeholders, which, in our prior episode, we touched on. When acquisitions take place, we start seeing, different goals and different directions, because now there's a larger table of investors and stakeholders that you're accountable to. And so there's this pressure to, drive up revenues. And so, like, this is where I've seen some, these pressures play out in certain decisions, but the decisions weren't um, discussed in time, or not. The CFO was not given enough time to analyze how can we strategically, work towards a higher volume, instead of these acting with these like seemingly low hanging fruit, but that might have consequences. For example, you know um, let's say we're in the construction world again, and we have a busy season. We have, let's say we're working on a large project. We landed a huge project, and this did happen in one of my previous lives. We landed a project like never before, a huge one. So it kind of ate up all the resources of any small jobs, because all of the crew was now working on this big project. And so from one side, it's like, oh my goodness, now we're landing these big projects, and now our staff is all tied up over there. Well, we want to get more revenues. Let's start hiring more people. And so, it's this misconception of, that this big project that we landed, that, was our first big thing, and we're not equipped to start doing, multiple of these. But that's where, the excitement and the pressures are leading, is like, oh no, now we're doubling our staff size. And so, from aggressive hiring from the owners, or the COOs or CEOs, move is, okay, now we're hiring a bunch more people. We now have a higher volume that we're wanting to take care of. But not sufficient planning wasn't done. So, if this is, as I mentioned, in this situation, all of the employees were now W-2. So whether we have work or not, they're getting paid, they're getting benefits. So there's this fixed, payroll amount, and unknown revenues. And so that's where I have had issues of, from the CFO seat. I'm like, oh my goodness, we're making a decision based on a one-time occasion. What happens when our revenue drops by 20%, next year? We're done with this project. And now we can't find a place for all of these employees. And now we have to probably fire, the extra employees that we got. So what I'm thinking about is like, is this a continual is this a one-time thing, or is this to be expected continually? And in construction, typically, you have contracts, you have a backlog of future projects that are starting, in a couple of months, or in the fall, or whatever. The bigger the project, the longer the planning. But if you have sufficient data tracking, and you can tell, like, okay, our backlog tells us that we're going to be busy, for 4 months, and now the backlog is growing. So with more of that data, you can kind of start making an analysis of, okay, well, what does the payroll look like for them, and how do we account for the seasonal drops? And again, are we going to have to be forced into layoffs if once this runway dries out? What happens next? So when there isn't a partnership, like I definitely understand this lens, and then I understand, the CFO's lens, but there needs to be really good communication and good synergy between the CEO and or COO or founder and CFO. We all need to be kind of on the same team, talking the same language before some of these big decisions get made.
Yeah, and I have a really good example of this. This is where you guys will see that I'm not a perfect human as much as I want to admit that I am. I'm just kidding. uh, when I was sitting as the CFO, very similar to things that you said, we're really looking at risk mitigation, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
looking at, and again, the risk mitigation part is usually the unpopular opinion. We're looking at, what's the worst possible outcome and how are we going to plan for that if that should happen? And when you're working with inventory, it gets really tricky, right? Because you're looking at, there's a cost to inventory hold, and you want to hold for as little as possible, but you also have to plan for transit, right? And so if you have import, you're working, I've talked about this again before, 6 to 8 weeks. And so you can't wait until you're almost out because now you have transit time. And so you have to time that so perfectly to keep your inventory time down. And a lot of it
Mm-hmm.
comes down to communication with your customers. And so sitting in the CFO seat, I would say we're not ordering this until we absolutely need it, until we have, contracts in place, until etc. On the CEO side of things, not the case, right? Like we have to have the inventory here because I don't want to say no to customers that come, because you miss opportunities if you say no. And that's where the brain is a little different with the CEO and CFO is you if you say no to a customer, they can go somewhere else in almost every single industry. You're not the only player in the game. And so I had to be a little bit more aggressive on the CEO side of this of the table,
Mm-hmm.
except for I got myself in trouble because costs are not always stagnant. So we worked predominantly in kilograms, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to usually purchase large MOQs. So an MOQ is a minimum order quantity. So
Mm-hmm.
most of the material that we dealt with, it's truckloads. So we're talking like 20,000 kgs at a time, 40,000 pounds for those of us that are American. Um, but your cost is not stagnant unless you contract for a certain amount. Import fees are certainly not stagnant. You usually can't contract that. It changes. And so if you don't have a CFO that is tightly working with sales and see the finance department and the sales department, I would say actually have a more toxic relationship than the CFO and CEO. They just they don't get along for valid reasons on both sides. I was able to see that relationship a little bit more unbiased as a CEO, but the sales team doesn't want to upset the customer, and they ride this fine line
Mm-hmm.
of advocating for the business while also advocating for the customer, because if they tick the
Mm-hmm.
customer off, they lose the business, which is also not great for the business. Whereas the CFO is only looking at the business, right? And little unfair, because if they lose the business, it's also not great for the CFO either. But my error was the CFO was not tightly watching this chain of event, right? You have to walk this fine line
Mm-hmm.
on and sales and finance communicating well. Well, sales was outpacing inventory. So when we pulled
Mm-hmm.
that inventory, we pulled it at a little the next rotation of inventory, we pulled it at a little bit higher cost. However, it was already sold. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to make a game day decision on, do we go back to the customer and up the cost due to it coming in?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't. We did not up the cost. We took the hit um,
Mm-hmm.
to maintain the relationship. I would be hard pressed to find many CEOs that would not make that call. in
Mm-hmm.
that situation. But it was an opportunity for us to really look at our processes. And we talked about scaling and growing on the last episode, but this is also a great opportunity. And when you're scaling, how important it is for these departments to really communicate with each other. Had sales and finance been talking, like, do we actually have this inventory? If
Mm-hmm.
we don't have this
Mm-hmm.
inventory, what is the next load going to be? We could have mitigated this, but this is a great example of how not only with employees cost creep, but if you are not clearly closely tracking um, all of the department's movements, and a business really does move like cogs in a wheel. If you're not tracking all of these movements and communicating uh, in a graceful, collective, collaborative, uh, frequent way, you can quickly go upside down. And once you've gone upside down, it's really hard to get back out of it. And so, giving again a
You
little
touched
bit.
on.
Yeah,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead. No, please do. Please jump in. I was just gonna
Yeah,
try
I'm
to
so sorry.
transition it over to you, and like giving a little bit of perspective in this again, this dance between the CEO, founder, and CFO, and in our decision making. As a CFO, I would have not made that call.
Yes, you touched on several good nuggets there. The communication, which I'll get to next, but I want to touch on the relationship with the salespeople and just kind of having different objectives and sometimes butting heads because of them. So you're absolutely right. For a salesperson and probably the owner, that customer relationship and customer satisfaction, it means everything, even if it means like eating the cost of something, and so this is where, if you don't have good communication and good synergy between the finance department and your sales folks, this is where things can lead to really bad financial decisions. And an example is, let's say things are month is really really slow, and so ops is talking with their sales department, and they're like, guys, we need to get these sales up. It's already almost midway, our month is almost done, and we're like 70% of our goal or whatever, or let's say 60% of our goal. So they're saying, do anything, hey Jared, you've been talking with this person for a week. Try to solidify that deal, whatever it takes. Give them a discount, just solidify that deal. And same thing with you. Like, let's just, whatever goes, let's just close those deals. We want to recognize those revenues this month, right? And so, and the salespeople, they're like, okay, great, that's what I needed. They were a little iffy about the price. Like, they'll be so happy. And so they all signed the contracts, right? But we're just talking about revenues here, right? And so the CFO, this is where I would be like, okay, so what are our margins now? Like, did we all just sign 20 contracts here just to make our numbers this month? But they're going to now be eating into our overhead because they are losers themselves. And so,
Mhm.
so there's this, where a CFO will probably be more aggressive and less open-minded of in the immediate consequence of seeing like, what, this is not a good sale. I'd rather have zero sales and not lose money than dip into into the sales. But this is where I feel like there's a sweet spot in there, right? So if you are talking, so if your ops person is putting pressure on, like, yes, let's discount these things, they should not be um, forking out this. They shouldn't be suggesting this without having had conversations with the CFO to do some sort of a even back of the napkin analysis of, okay, if we land these and with this discount, what is that going to look like for us? And have we now signed up for, does this discount decision now sign us up for good? We're trying to just rush and close the deals just so we make our goals this month. But now this customer is going to be expecting like, well, this is like, yeah, I'll continue doing business with you because you're way cheaper than the competitors. I'll absolutely give you my business, but
Mhm.
you're still making a loss, right? And so you have to ask, like, have we now put ourselves in the basically a expectation that we're the business that now is offering these low costs, and so we've now falsely advertised what we really can, and so now any sort of increases, they're going to look elsewhere because now we've become less competitive. Thinking about these kinds of kind of long-term consequences. That's why you have to be, partnered up and have a good relationship with the CFO, because they'll be able to guide you and see if this is a short-term gain or is it a long-term gain. And I'd love to hear. You had an example of some just bad sales. Not every sale is a good sale. So I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. It really doesn't matter what seat I sit in. I have a pretty strong opinion that not every sale is a good sale. I think you have to look at the end game. And I really established this opinion as a CFO. I think most CFOs would probably agree with me in the fact that not every sale is a good sale. Because again, we're looking at the layers. We're looking at it's not just revenue. What's the margin? What's the overhead? We're looking at it holistically. Whereas operations, they're looking at it from a different lens also. They're looking at it from the lens of, well, there's a hold time on this, right? And so, yeah, we may have taken a hit on margin, but there's a cost for it to sit on the shelf and not be sold.
Mm-hmm.
It's now moved. We can
Mm-hmm.
put something else that will maybe churn a little quicker. Um, and so moving into the CEO seat, I continued that mindset. It really didn't change. What did
Mm-hmm.
change is the way that I was able to communicate and have those conversations with the other departments, because from the CFO seat, this is where I'm going to dog on the CFOs a little bit. From the CFO seat, we a lot of times and I was no exception. I am dogging on myself here too. We rule with an iron fist. No, that doesn't make sense. And then we just move on to the next thing. Um, or no, we can't do that. It would eat into the margins, and then we move on to the next thing. I think we talked about this too in previous episodes, and our personalities just kind of like
Mm-hmm.
we're maybe not as brass as we come across, but our job is to protect the business at all costs. And so when we make decisions or when we roll with these iron fists, it's really at the heart of protecting the business. Whereas from the CEO side of things, you peel away the layers in a different aspect. And I played the mediator between sales and finance all the time, which was a fun situation to be in, because I got to witness it from the outside, having had sat in
Mm-hmm.
one of those seats before and completely understanding
Mm-hmm.
the CFO side, but now having to report to a different group of people. And so one of the situations that came to me was a situation where the salesperson had it was in a negotiation stage. He was negotiating a pretty large deal with a pretty reputable customer or a prospect, and um, and they were taking multiple SKUs. So we had variety in our corner, and the CFO was not as seasoned. Pretty new to the role, not new to the industry, but we've talked a lot about bookkeepers, controllers, and CFOs and how what they're supposed to be looking at, what their tasks are. They were coming from a controller position, so their brain wasn't quite wired in like looking at the long game yet and looking at the strategy. They were really in the here and now. And so when we looked at all three of the SKUs, one of the SKUs that he was trying to sell to the customer was being sold at a very thin margin. And so when the proposal was taken to the CFO said, you can sell this one and two to them, but you can't sell three to them. We can't accept that margin. Well, like most salespeople, they said, I don't accept that answer. I'm going to the next person in charge, right? So it came to my desk and they pled their case. And here's where the CFO missed the mark. Item 1 and 2 were at a very large margin. Like it more than covered the slim margin on item 3. And so they were only looking at the win on 1 and 2, but when you put it all together, our overall margin was in line with our company minimum. And so this is where the CFO can sometimes get into a tricky situation in looking at it very isolated. In if we were only selling them that third item solo, I would have said no, no, it's not industry standard. They're not going to be able to go find that anywhere else. But we're winning all 3 of the business. And if we can drive down the client's ability or need to go somewhere else, you're probably going to lock them in for a longer term, right? And in that, the strategy in my brain was the overall margin is fine, but now we're going to go talk to procurement. And we're going to work with procurement on leveraging all of we were diversified in our supply chain. Now we're going to go talk to procurement about leveraging some pricing against the different suppliers, right? And so that's where the CEO, CFO, like you said, their conversation and their communication need to be tight, because I think most CFOs probably would have made that decision in these 2 make sense, this one doesn't. Some very good CFOs may have put it all together and said, yeah, that makes sense. But a CEO is going to make that call in what's the overall margin? What are we actually losing here? And the business got pushed through, and they turned into a very fruitful customer. They took I think it was an 18-month contract, and it was very large quantities. And so I would say that is a difference in altogether. Those 3 SKUs were good revenue. Had we only been talking about that third SKU, it would have been revenue that I would have said no to, because after you take out commission, after you take out overhead, you're in the negative, and it's certainly not worth it. But this is that sweet dance that the CEO needs to play, because they're not only having this relationship with the CEO. Now we've talked about this communication that the CEO, CFO needs to have. But again, giving a little grace to our listeners who likely are business owners, founders, leaders, CEOs themselves, the CEO has to have that relationship with the COO, with procurement, with sales, with marketing, and they're having to keep all of these relationships, all of these balls in the air, if you will, in a way that everyone is not ready to start World War III. And so I don't know if that answers your question or not, but not all revenue is good revenue, but you have to get creative when you look at it.
You touched on some really great things, and I want to kind of jump on the train of dogging on ourselves, because I do want to to have our listeners understand that we are also human beings. We have learned from mistakes. We continue to learn from our mistakes. I will be, growing for many, many more years. I'm nowhere near where I want to be as a leader. It's a daily battle in my head every day to try to be a better person and a better leader. But I still get caught up on my own, kind of anxieties in life. And so I want to touch a little bit on just that importance of communication, right? Because, I talk about how communication between CFO and, ops, founder, sales, whatever. And I have to say that this is probably one of my biggest challenges and the areas where I need the most work is communication about hard things, communication about like not just calling things out at face value and okay, you go figure it out or you go deal with it, but raising alarms if it's something that needs to, like if it's a big deal, then being like, we need to meet about this and blah blah blah. This so I am a very introverted person. I really I thrive when I am alone in my head talking to my numbers. The hardest part of my position and in the career that I chose is that human element, that interaction. It's hard conversations. It's you're not always delivering the best news, or trying to bring up a problem that we need to solve together. And I still have I make mistakes here all the time, and my biggest mistake is not communicating loudly enough when something is a big deal, or choosing to I'm all about written backup and documentation of what did I convey, who was involved, how was it said. Like I'm all about backup, but that also means that I look to those written kind of conversations about things that really need to be talked about in a video or a phone call, so I know that they're grasping the gravity of the situation. So like a prime example was, I've there are some executive reports that I provide to various clients based on their industry, and there was this one report that was showing that property wasn't performing like the rest of the portfolio. Our DSCR was essentially, we did not have enough operating income to cover the debt service. And so, I kind of kept on flagging, that there's this property has this issue, and that we're stating that we don't have enough operating income to cover the debt service, but just kind of leaving it as a comment and in the sea of other analyses, right? And I mentioned it several times in my monthly reporting and everything, but eventually it caught up with us. We were then short on cash, and we were not able to pay our mortgage one month, and had to do all kinds of cash movements and everything like that to float it. And it became a big deal, and now it was a burning fire that we're all trying to figure out. And where it should have been, when I placed that seed the first time, I should have been talking about, hey, we need to refi, we need, like, we're gonna our operations are not going to drastically increase and get 10% better or whatever overnight, unless we hike up our rents, but we're locked in for 5 years. So it's kind of putting more gravity, or being like, hey, let's flag this, but let's have a conversation about this. And so a part of a good CFO is not just reporting on the damn numbers, it's really talking about, it's having that conversation around them, and and providing solutions and recommendations, or just raising hell of, we need to figure this out because this is going to be a big deal in a couple of months. So
Yeah,
yes,
I think
communication.
you, no, yeah, I think we've touched on communication in almost every episode. And again, like dogging on ourselves, like accounting professionals, finance professionals are truly not the best at communication. And I think that a lot of it is in our delivery. I know for me, like I know that I'm not, um, I don't know the right word. I know that I'm not a mean person, but my delivery definitely isn't soft.
Hmm.
It
We
definitely is a
share that.
little rough around the edges. And if you know me, you just know, right? Like this is just cash being
Hmm.
cash. And um most of my people appreciate that. Like there's no beating around the bush, if you will. But if you don't have a good relationship, there has to be those kind of guardrails or guide rails put in place. And so moving from the CFO to CEO role, I would say that that was my hardest challenge was
Mm-hmm.
me and my predecessor was we had a really good relationship and they knew exactly how I communicated. I knew exactly how they communicated. There, we had already cut through the BS of delivery. Like when I would say something, it would just be taken at face value. And like, there's no
Mm-hmm.
extra of like, well, that was a weird tone, or why did she add in all of that extra guac and sour cream? It was just, she's just delivering the news, right? But going into the CEO role, I'm now not just having this relationship with the CFO, I'm now having this with operations, I'm having this with marketing, I'm having this with
Mm-hmm.
sales. And so there was this multitude of personalities. And I think I talked
Mm-hmm.
about this on another episode too. And one of the hardest relationships for me to overcome this was with the operations person. And, you know, they were very much they were relational in the fact that they needed a little of the fluff, right? Like we had to start all of our meetings with a little bit of that, like,
Mm-hmm.
how's the weather? How's your spouse? You know, and over time we built a great relationship. In fact, he texted me a couple weeks ago that he was just north of me. And
Mm-hmm.
so we built this relationship over time, but it was very hard at first because he took a lot of what I would say very personally because we hadn't built the rapport
Mm-hmm.
in how
Mm-hmm.
to deliver things. And um you know, understanding that he wasn't taking my delivery in the way that it was actually being delivered or how I had, you know, perceived it being delivered, he then got defensive and
Mm-hmm.
would shut down. And then, you know, when one person shuts down in any conversation, the conversation really is pointless. Like there's really there's no
Yeah.
moving past it when you start to put these barriers up. And so I would say communication is such a big thing, and it was something I'm still working on it. I still get people telling me
Mm-hmm.
like, "Cash, you're so brass." Like, promise I'm not. Like the RBF face is just like it's just perma there. Um, but yes, when you can build these relationships and people start to learn you and start to learn your personality, your delivery, etc., you you propel not only yourself but the business forward. And so
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more that I will continue to harp on communication and relationships because you don't have to get along. I'm probably one of the biggest advocates for disagreements because if you're having disagreements, you have engaged people. The disagreements need
Mm-hmm.
to be healthy, but you have critical thinking going
Yes.
on. You have people advocating for all corners of the business that you might not see, especially in that CFO seat. Um, and you're able to make strategic decisions in a way that you wouldn't be able to if everyone or if even a single person was disconnected at the table. So I have said this to most of the people that have worked for me that if everyone at the table agrees with me, someone at the table is not necessary.
Mm-hmm. Good point. And great on kind of touching about, you know, communication and in a way that reaches your audience in a productive way. I talked earlier about a non-blame environment, which I really try to foster in every day of my life because I also have a very like blunt delivery, you know, and because like with me, what you see is what you get. There's no beating around the bush. I don't have time for that. And I don't like the guessing game, you know, let's
Mhm.
just get to the point, you know? And so, but with that comes, you know, careful delivery. So what I have, because yes, I have offended many people throughout my life and will probably continue doing so. I overanalyze conversations after the fact and really learn what I shouldn't be doing after I've already made the errors. But in any case, with what I found with the non-blame environment and non-blame approach is, you know, when we find that one area that something fell through, it's so important to talk about it as like uh, a process that fell through, and trying to understand the process versus, this fell through on your lap, or your team member effed up here, or dropped the ball here. Like, really trying to get to exactly where that problem was, and eliminating any sort of names that might be associated with it. That's kind of what gets that other side to not see it as you bringing up issues as a personal attack. And now, when everybody kind of knows that, hey, we talk about real issues here, but we're trying to solve them and trying to understand where we don't have a process in place, or where we need to tweak a process. So, but it's such a journey getting there. And, unless your really whole company operates with that same expectation, then you will never have people trusting you. If your colleague, if he knows that the president of the company rips him a new one with, any sort of errors, or any sort of instances that come up on his watch, but then, he's working with you, and you're just trying to get to the problem. He's not going to see you for your problem solving. He's going to know, like, well, in this place I get chewed out, and so he's not going to be upfront with you. And it's not until you kind of establish that trust, and until the whole organization can kind of establish that trust, then, people won't be, they'll kind of dodge the conversation, because they'll see it as them being attacked, versus like, we're trying to solve a problem together. But it is one of the hardest things in our everyday world, Cash, is that, like, the tricky dance of not hurting people's feelings, but trying to call the issues forward. And I feel like that was probably one of the reasons why I didn't call out, hey, this is a big deal, this is going to catch up with us in a few months, because that would have had to say, hey, somebody screwed up in making this deal the way, this debt structure, and this operating structure and stuff like that. But you got to remove the names and just call the problem for what it is, and then people will start joining with the problem solving.
Well, I think it's, as you were talking, something that popped into my mind. I feel like you and I I speak for myself, but hopefully for both of us, that we have um, a very cherished friendship, both professionally and personally. Like, you're a dear friend to me personally, but also a very respected colleague. I've talked previously on, when I need a second set of eyes on something, or I need a second opinion on something, you're certainly in that sphere of people that I'm calling for that opinion. But, one instance in, like, where I think context matters, and there's a time and a place for written, and there's a time and a place for verbal. And you and I,
Mm-hmm.
we are very strategic in who we put in our sphere, who we have working for us. And I would say that we're both very protective of those people. The people that I have working for
Mm-hmm.
me, they were hand selected. I take
Mm-hmm.
pride in saying that I do all of my own hiring. I'm very involved in my hiring. I actually have
Mm-hmm.
been very involved in all of the hiring for my entire career, because who you
Mm-hmm.
have working for you is so important. And likewise for you. And we've touched on this. I also don't want to get too in the weeds about who it is or what lengths it is, but you and I have a professional working relationship, and you have contracted my company to do a few things for
Mhm.
you, and those employees are representing the firm and doing a great job. The first week was a little not, I wouldn't say rough, but onboarding, whether it's internally, externally,
Mhm.
onboarding is just rough. I don't know anyone that can do it,
Yeah.
perfect and not be exhausted at the end of it. And
Yes.
it was also during a tax week, which we've also touched on.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and I remember getting an email from you. You probably know exactly where I'm going to go with this. I remember getting an email saying like things have gone a little slow this week, right? Because in our sphere,
Mhm.
if we're not hearing things, we may not be responding, but if we're not hearing things, we just assume like nothing's getting done.
That they're
I'm
going
also
well.
that way
Mm.
too. Like
Mm.
I
Mhm.
jump to like the negative intent. And so when I'm reading this, there's no, my eyes are watering, sorry. When I'm reading this email,
I made
I
you cry.
instantly jumped, I'm crying, I'm crying. I instantly jumped into defense mode, like kind of like a mom mode and like, whoa, hold the phone
Mhm.
here, friend. Uh,
Mhm.
because I knew what had been going on. There just hadn't been a lot of communication because I knew what was also going on in your sphere.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I already respect you to a level that you, I'm sure, already know. But you had then met with her. This is going to drive me crazy. You had then met with this specific. I know, like my eyes are just like watering. I'm not crying, guys. I promise. The listeners that are not watching this on YouTube are probably going to be like, "What in the world is going on?" Um, Anywho, so I got really defensive over this email and I instantly like responded, which is pretty out of character for me. I usually can like digest, take some of the emotion out and I might like rapid like email and then like, we're gonna save that in the draft folder for a little bit and come back a
Mhm.
little bit more level headed. But I kind of fired it off because I was a little spicy in like protecting her. Um,
Mhm.
and then you had met with her and you sent
Mhm.
me a text and you were like, she's amazing. You clearly were, yeah, you, etc. But I had so much respect for you in that moment because most leaders, and I also am dogging on myself here, most leaders have a very hard time saying that they were wrong or admitting that they were wrong. And they also have a really hard time, um, a really hard time taking the emotion out of it. And so, as we're talking about communication, as we're talking about being better at it, I want you to give yourself a little grace and credit here in that you are a fantastic leader and you communicate very well most of the time. um, but it was also like a testament to you can have, I think the other beautiful thing in this was we have this professional relationship where we cannot always agree, we cannot always see eye to eye, but we can still come back to the table and respect each other. And then we can also respect each other and have a great relationship outside of things. So I hope that most of the leaders and listeners are hearing that these relationships within the business can be difficult. These conversations can be difficult, but they don't have to be destructive. They don't have to be uh, they don't have to be detrimental, if you will. In um, Yeah, I just give yourself some grace. But I also hope the listeners hear that there's a time and a place. Had that conversation. And when we had the conversation later, it was like, you had said to me, I had only heard something 2 days ago, so it's expired news. And
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so I think our analytical brain always wants that documentation of like, we had this conversation, here's the proof in the pudding. But there's also so much value in verbal, in face to face, in
Yeah.
what have you.
Absolutely. And I want to specifically touch on the example that you provided because just a terrible call to have it in verbal format because my essentially you received like an unintended, like you, how you received it was like something went wrong. Where for me, for me it was like, hey, because I didn't know how you guys were communicating, or like how you guys are divvying up the work for the full package. And
Mhm.
so in my mind, I'm hearing like, okay, so we only met with one of the two workers, and we signed up for 40 hours, but we're not getting it, so we need to, or my assumption is we're not getting it.
Mhm.
And so we need to do something differently. So in my mind, and it was like a one of my many tasks that morning, is I need to fire this off
Exactly.
so we can talk, and then blah blah blah. And totally not thinking about, I absolutely caught on that you got defensive, because then I read it and I'm like, oh, okay, like this, she's seeing as like, I'm not happy with the work provided, or we're getting something different than what we signed up for, or something's lacking. And it is so not what I meant to say. It
Yeah.
was like, hey, like, are we actually doing the full 40 hours, or do we need to be meeting with the second person? And
Yeah.
so, but that kind of thing it needs to be a conversation. So what
Mhm.
I should have done, because I was rushing through, I need to talk with this person and this person, is like, hey, I'd love to have 10 minutes with you to talk about how the first week went.
Yeah.
And like, that would have solved absolutely everything. But here I am, I'm like, this is on my mind, so now it's on
Yeah.
paper, and I am not cognizant of my delivery, because again, like, what's on my mind, it just gets put on paper, like,
Yeah.
and so
Nope. I'm
I
the same way.
absolutely.
No, I'm the same way. And I'm
So
hoping the listeners can hear that like, again, these are mistakes that we haven't only made, that we continue to make. And it's also one of the things when I transitioned from CFO to CEO, I actually worked with, this is really letting my like ego down right now. Like you guys are really seeing behind the curtain right now. But I worked with a executive coach, and one of the
mm-hmm,
biggest things we worked on was delivery and
mm-hmm,
relationship, um and one of the things he helped me with was looking at things through the lens of positive intent. As humans, we
mm-hmm,
instantly want to put negative intent into our mind, and what I mean, like, even for those of us that are not leaders in this, like, if you're driving down the freeway, right? We all, by and large, drive cars. We all drive on the freeway. We all have opinions about driving and drivers, etc. But if you're driving down the freeway and someone is flying past you and then cuts you off, the immediate reaction is some fingers and some explicit words, right? At least if you're in my vehicle, that's what's happening,
same here.
right? But that's instantly where our mind goes. Like, this mother trucker just cut me off. Like, does he not know that I'm trying to get my kids to school or soccer practice? Or like, how can he not be thinking about me? Instead, when you can shift your mind to, what if he's trying to go get to his wife who just got into a car accident? Or what if he's rushing to the emergency
Mm-hmm,
room because his mother fell and is getting life flighted there, etc. When you can turn the lens into a positive and come at it at that angle, it changes the dynamics of the conversation. And when I talk about the interactions with my operations person, I really had
mm-hmm,
to turn those positive intent lenses on, because very much I was sitting in your seat with me, and if I said something, it certainly was not ever meant that way. Maybe sometimes, maybe like 99% of the time it was meant in the right way, but when I go back and read some of my delivery, when he would say, yeah, like, your email is really defensive or aggressive or pointing fingers or etc., and I go back and read it, I'm like, yeah, I can understand how you could see that, right? And it
mm-hmm,
wasn't
mm-hmm,
how I was reading it, but like you, many of those times it was a to do. Like, I had to get this off of the to do, and I didn't
mm-hmm.
have time for the fluff around it.
Yeah.
Um, but also, like you said, like, had I just had a conversation and just said, hey, look, like, we got to move the inventory a little quicker. Like, we're at 30 days and we really need to be at 25 days. The conversation would have, the issue would have been like a non-issue. But when you
Mm-hmm,
read it and you don't have tone and I'm not really a believer in emojis in professional. Some people are. You won't offend me if you have them. You're probably just not going to get emails from me with emojis. But when you
Mm-hmm.
don't have tone, when you don't have any of that behind your email, it does get a little bit hard. Like, does she really mean it like that? Like, do I really need to put on the football pads and
Mm-hmm.
get a little defensive right now? The problem is nine
Mm-hmm.
times out of 10, you don't need to.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good way of looking at it is like think about the before you get riled up reading something, like do think about the person's intentions. And I think you just hit the nail on the head there, because this goes into all kinds of relationships that you will have in your life. And this is something that my husband and I really try to think about when we're both very sensitive to each other's like moods and words and whatever. Like we really feed off of each other.
Mhm.
And if like one person is like kind of in a funk in the morning or something, and the other one is like, hey, are you okay, or whatever, and and if there's like whatever this side does, like if it's not like
Mhm.
super enthusiastic, then the other person thinks that they did something wrong or whatever, or they get mad at the. So we started really looking at like we both have such an understanding for each other that we both have very stressful jobs, and like very very stressful. And it's like when if I get approached when I'm like in the middle of trying to solve a
Mhm.
problem, but then there are five people interrupting me, and then my husband comes in and tells me something that about like some a problem that we have to figure out, and I'm not ready for it, I will like bark at him. I say it like because honestly that's how I feel, is like I'm
Mhm.
barking at him like, no, like don't bother me right now, I can't think about this. And but we've learned, we've been together long enough, we really understand each other, and we really understand that we the last thing that either of us want to ever do is hurt the other person. We are
Mhm.
very 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 careful about saying something in the heat of the moment that we can't then unsay. So when it's like the body language that like that they're in a funk, but we really try to give each other like that grace of like, did she mean, I know she didn't mean it, I know that this is the stress playing out. And so
Mhm.
like my husband has so much patience for me because he knows that I mean well. And the same goes back, like when we're just in our off moods, we know the intention, and so we don't choose to cling on to the delivery of a person who's not having the best day. So
Mhm.
I think you touched on just such a good thing that applies in all relationships, and we have to be mindful that we
Mhm.
we are all humans, we're all going through our own
Yep.
stresses, and kind of having that careful approach in how we deliver any news is
Yep. I
definitely
agree. And
something to be mindful.
we are the same. Like I'll be like deep in a spreadsheet or something and AJ will come in and like start asking questions and you can totally like I'm just like so annoyed and he just doesn't get it. Like and we actually had a like you had a conversation. I'm like, look, my job is not one where I can just like pause and come back to it. Like it's you kind of have to
Mm-hmm.
see it all the way through. But
Mm-hmm.
same. But and we've talked about the parent relationship too. Like as a parent, I feel like I've become a better leader because I see all of my employees as children
Mm-hmm.
to me. But also, being married and walking through different seasons, because marriage certainly isn't easy either. But we have this kind of mindset that if we're fighting and there's a quote unquote winner, who wins? Really, no one in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that
Nobody wins.
translate into the business world, and I really saw it
Mm-hmm.
as a CEO. In
Mm-hmm.
as a CFO, you're fighting with the sales, you're fighting with operations, you're fighting with marketing. You're just like, whatever, I'm protecting the business. You kind of have this mindset of like you're doing that. But when you transition and you're dealing with multiple of the relationships, I really was awarded the opportunity to see like if finance and sales are fighting and one reigns superior, is the business really winning? No. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
fighting with operations or this relationship isn't being stewarded, is the business really winning? No. And so, to your point, you kind of have to have that mindset going in of like, we're in the same boat together. The goal is to protect the business, and being able to hear both sides of the problem and find common ground is where I've seen the most success. It doesn't matter where you sit in the business, but when you can put the business first and find the root of the problem and find a middle ground, I will tell you, if both parties are walking away from quote unquote the negotiation table a little unhappy, it was probably a fair deal, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But please, please, if you hear anything out of all of our rambling, it's steward these relationships and don't go into them with this win mentality, because no
Mm-hmm.
one wins in that, and the business certainly doesn't win in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we'll probably continue touching on this in many future episodes because, team, as we walk through these things, we're talking about different problems that business leaders solve. But the continual hardest problem to solve is like, how do we show up for each other every day? It's those human interactions, it's our dynamics with our team members that really make or break our experience. And, so these are the challenges we will continue to sprinkle in because, behind the numbers and behind that balance sheet is a complex sea of lots of different personalities.
Yep, yep. Should we start to land this plane?
Yes, I think we should.
Okay. We have a question though before, so we can go quickly, but uh, what is in your cup in the morning and what is in your cup in the evening? As far as what are you drinking in the morning,
Mm,
what are you drinking in the evening?
yes. I my family and just my culture in general, we're huge tea drinkers. We like tea. Drinking tea is not. It's not just a drink that you drink. It's not a liquid to like hydrate. It's an experience. Like it is. It's something that we do together when we like greet the morning, when we celebrate triumphs, when we are when something bad has happened and we're trying to comfort each other. Like having tea together has just been something that like throughout my childhood, and now I introduced my husband to tea. I love coffee, like I love caffeine, and I love the bitterness of coffee. Like I drink it black, no sugar, no creamer. I just love the dark nice coffee taste and bitterness and the coffee breath. I love the whole experience. But but I've since I introduced my husband to tea, he loves the taste so much more that we kind of trashed our coffee maker and everything like that, and so we just started drinking tea. But for me, the coffee in the morning, that's kind of where I feel like I can battle the world, is if I have like if I chug a ton of tea of coffee. And so and I have this obsession with cappuccinos. Just love cappuccinos. Don't like Starbucks cappuccinos because they're just gross, but they're not cappuccinos. But like a nice restaurant, if like especially Italian restaurants, really make good cappuccinos, and I love cappuccinos. So my hubby got me a cappuccino maker for Christmas, and he has been so sweet to actually like make me a cup every morning. So I now drink a cappuccino every morning, and then I just kind of have tea for the rest of the day.
I
How
love
about
it.
you?
I love it. Um, I also love tea, but now I'm just gonna pick your brain when we have so much to talk about when I come visit. Also, I am also Italian, so when you were like Italian restaurant, I almost texted you today because there is um an Italian restaurant there. we'll keep your
Mm-hmm.
location under wraps. But there is a Italian restaurant in your metro that every
Mm-hmm.
time I come there, I'm like, I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna try that. I'm like, I should text her. I should text her
Oh
and be
my
like,
God.
we should go
Yes.
here while I'm there. And I bet you they have a good
Yes.
cappuccino. But I'm excited to try
Nice.
your hubby's cappuccino in the morning. Same.
Yes.
So every morning I drink athletic greens followed by a little
Mm-hmm.
concoction of like vital proteins and amino acids and collagen and all that. And then I have
Good girl.
a cup of
Yeah.
coffee that just kind of, I wouldn't say I'm addicted to caffeine. I just really enjoy coffee, really good coffee, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of gets my day going. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's water throughout the day. And then the evening, I do like to cap it off with a cup of tea, but um, I have already mentioned we're in Utah, which is a little bit of a different state, if you will. We came from the Pacific Northwest, which has world-class Pinot Noir. And
Mm-hmm.
so I do like a good glass of Pinot, not every night, but
Nice. As a
yes,
little
so
nightcap.
is a little
Love
nightcap.
it.
Yes. Yeah. So,
That's
um,
awesome.
yeah. So
I'll make sure
we'll
I
be
have some
drinking
handy.
tea and bread on our live podcast.
That's right.
Oh my goodness,
Love
our
it. Love
listeners are
it.
in for a treat. All right, listeners, we are so grateful you have, endured this episode with us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening, team. If you've ever wondered how something slipped past you, hear this. You didn't miss it because you weren't paying attention. You missed it because you were focused on where you needed to be. Leadership isn't about carrying every perspective alone. It's about knowing when to widen the view, because that's where clarity and better decisions actually start. If this resonated with you, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Pass the Balance Sheet so you don't miss what's next. And share this with someone who might need the reminder. We'll see you next time. Pass the Balance Sheet.